photographic organisations, which are great, but the one I really cherish
Couple more seats further forward if we could get everybody in, please. Okay, let's kick things off. Hi everybody, and welcome back to our meeting number 2 at the CWEA, the first time we've had a guest speaker, and we've gone out and got a really, really good guest speaker for us tonight. For those of you who read all the way to the bottom of Diana's email that said what's on this weekend, you would have noticed that Diane Kelsey was supposed to be the MC, and I'm not Diane Kelsey. She rang me about half an hour ago to say she's feeling crook, so I'm going to make this up as I go along. So if we jump around a little bit, it's because I haven't thought about what I'm going to say. So anyway, what we normally do is start with health and safety, so it's just a reiteration of what we learned last time. This is a new place. The crux of getting out of here as we go out these 2 side doors or out the back door and out of the building as quickly as you can go, and then get around to the front. So all assembly is back up on Gloucester Street. If we need firefighting and or first aid, it's on the wall just outside the door, and toilets are over through there. If you haven't found those now, it's probably a bit late. So that's good. The other thing I want to say, and as we've said right early on, it's going to be a bit of a moving feast as we figure out how the dynamics of this place work. So what we want to do is, we've said last week you could come in the front door. You might have noticed it's a bit harder to get into tonight, so we've now decided with security issues we don't want the front door open the whole time. So I just ask everybody to come around the back as a standard procedure from here on in. Where's John Hawkins? Can you rip out and get that trophy? It's in the first thing I want to do is a leftover from last year, and that is something that we do occasionally, and that's a little bit special. It doesn't happen every year, but it's a trophy that happens essentially to recognise fantastic effort, effectively. And the winner of the Service Award trophy last year is somebody who fits in that category of just doing everything without making much of a song and dance about anything. Whenever I've asked this guy, can you do such and such, it just happens. It's not a matter of how or who or how can happen. So I really think this is a sort of a well-deserved trophy and something we wanted to recognise as the committee. So for last year's Service Award, I'd ask John Casey to come forward and get it, please. Congratulations, John. You can stick that on the mantelpiece and it's a solid sort of a piece of doing. Well done. Thank you again. And while you're here, a question about the MDC. Somebody asked before, when's the first MDC ready to go?
The MDC status is that the over Christmas period one of Secret closed on the 31st of January. That will now be judged, and that will be shown at the last meeting of this month. And well, while I'm up here,
keep going.
Think of a number between 1 and 7.
7.
Just a moment.
Okay. Let me put this one down. You hold that.
And then think of a number between 1 and 21 or something, I think it is for 7.
19.
So the topic for this month is Winds of Change.
Winds of Change.
Winds of Change. I'll send an email around tomorrow so you'll all have it in your inbox. For the newbies here, the MDC is a try it and see. Anything goes. There's no rules, there's no grades. So all the C grades and B grades and A grades don't matter anything. You just put your image in once a month. It has to be taken within the last month. has to be within the appropriate size of 3,800 to whatever, and comply with the topic. If you don't comply with the topic, the judges might be severe. Otherwise, but you won't know because it's just, you won't see a result. But it's all good fun, and a lot of people do experimental things in that, and it's shown at the last meeting each month. So thank you for everything.
Congratulations again. Thank you, John. Now, isn't that a perfect example? I just said, oh, by the way, MDC, and he leaps right in and just, John just does things really easily, so really, really pleased to be able to award him that trophy. So instead of going through all the intros and bits and pieces, I'm going to essentially pass on to Andris and get underway with the presentation tonight. I don't think Andris Apes needs much by way of introduction to all of you. Anybody who has even passing of interest in photography knows who he is. There is pretty much everybody who has a coffee table book of dramatic New Zealand landscapes. If they haven't got an Andris Apes one, then they haven't got a real one, is all I can say about that. So they're the way to go forward. I first met Andris when I was invited to speak at the Blenheim Photography Club. They saw me do a presentation here. It was on truth and fiction and digital photography, and they rang me up and said, you want to come and speak to our club and do the same presentation? And I turned up there, and they said, oh, you're the second speaker, there's another bloke first, and then you'll be after him. It's just Andy, so that's fine. And I went, oh, who's Andy? This bloke here, Andris Apes, and I'm thinking, holy moly, I'm supposed to go number 2 to him. It kind of freaked me out a bit, actually. But the presentation went really well, and I think we were complimentary, so it was great. I also was in a speaking engagement with Andris about 6 months ago when we spoke with the NZIPP. They did a 10-10-10 night that a few people might have been to. The theory of that was 10 photographers showed 10 images and spoke for 10 minutes. And so Andy and I were both invited to do that. It would be fair to say that one or two of the photographers, and most definitely including both Andy and I, did all right with the 10 photographs, but we struggled a bit when it came to stopping talking after 10 minutes, so we went to go on a bit longer. So I've said to him tonight, there is no limit. So we're just going to let him talk while you want to listen, and while you listen, just nod and smile and ask some questions, and he'll be here till midnight if we need to. So I'm going to pass over to Andy, who's just going to stay where he is, and take over as the star of the show. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andris Apes.
That's working, good. I will spend some time wandering around. Thanks, Ian, for that introduction, and you were kind to me, so thank you. I've got about a kilo of stainless in my knees, in my knee right now. So if I trip over, someone pick me up, please. And and it's only been in there for a month and a half or 2 months, and so I'm not very agile on it yet. So forgive me, and also I'm slurring in my speech at times, so you're allowed to throw things at me, but not heavy, damaging things. Squashy tomatoes are okay, and I will pull myself up a little bit and talk more sensibly. I don't know many of you here, although some have introduced themselves, and my memory is not that good at my age anymore. So I have a 10-minute movie made by, who was made by? Well, anyway, it's the background of me, and I thought I want to look around at those who are attending. I think it's worth spending 10 minutes getting to know my background before I break into my presentation. So you can start that whenever you like.
I've always felt if I can get mood, feeling, and a feeling in your heart about an image, I think I've succeeded. But I don't call myself an artist. I think it's for others. Now, if they say that, I'll accept it graciously. But I'm not going to call myself an artist. Bugger it. I've got quite a few awards over the years, but mainly from photographers and photographic organisations, which are great. But the one I really cherish is the New Zealand Order of Merit. That means that the work I've been doing for 40 or 50 years is appreciated by people other than photographers, and that's really rewarding. When I first went to Fiordland, working for Forest Research, and we went over miles and miles of country where there's no people, just the sounds of the birds, sounds of water and sounds of the vegetation blowing in the wind. And I became obsessed with it, really. And I didn't own a camera then, but I thought, I've got to go back and buy a camera, and I've got to come back into Fiordland, I've got to show people what we've got here. But I was a useless photographer for a start. I didn't know anything about anything. And over a period of few years, I got some lucky breaks with some sponsors, and my landscape started to sell. So about 30 years ago, I became a full-time landscape photographer. I come from a small country, but not that I know a lot about it, because I left it when I was 1 year old. They were in their 20s, early 20s when they met and fell in love. Then I was born, and then he had to go off to the front. So they were torn apart physically, and he saw me only once. Dear Emilia, I'm longing for you. Whenever you're not with me, everything seems dark and gloomy. Only the autumn winds rage. They make me restless, but I know that even they will cease. Nothing is forever. So they put him in a German unit, and they fought against the Russians. So he was in the Latvian army, the Russian army, and the German army, and he was shunted backwards and forwards. We only had what my mother could carry, which was a bag of letters and me. That's all.
I'm in the middle and in the front there, and the reason I've got a
It was mainly Latvians and Poles there,
face
and a lot of children my age
put between two girls.
walking around the camp looking for, maybe trying to find something to eat. An American soldier came up to me and handed me this tube. I didn't know what to do with it. He just wandered off, and I opened it up, and it smelled good. So I squeezed the whole lot into my mouth, but as it turned out, it was toothpaste. So after 4.5, almost 5 years, my mother was asked if she'd like to go to New Zealand, and she didn't know where it was. She just asked if there were snakes there, I think, seemed to recall, and they said no. So she said, okay, I'll go there. We were a solitary sort of partnership, mother and son, and that was a very lonely existence for us. It was terrible, really, because my mother ended up in a pretty bad relationship, and I wasn't welcome at home, put it that way. Well, even when I first started work, when I left home, I went to the forestry school in Nelson, and everyone who came had families to go home to. And I pretended I had a family and friends because I didn't want to be seen to be a lone wolf sort of thing. But I'd watch them all go and saying I was going to get the next bus out, next bus out. So I was used to being on my own wherever I went. 90% of my work is planning and exploring. I only take 20 photos a year, really, but I'll spend days researching locations and then trying to narrow it down to exactly where you have to stand, whether it's there, here, or a metre over there. I hardly ever take a photograph when I arrive somewhere new. I'll take a few with my iPhone for planning purposes and then go home and analyse it with Google Earth or a GPS and say, right, I'd like this to be in spring when there's a greater variation of greens in the forest. So some of them stretch out for years. To get this photograph, I had to bring my extension ladder on the back of my bike up to the start of this ridge, cut a trail up to where I found a tree, put the ladder up against it, and then had to wait a year for the right weather because I didn't want to show the drop in mountain range there, which gave a false horizon. So I had to wait for a thin layer of cloud which the sun could go over and under and illuminate the foreground and the background. This is Fiordland National Park. I was after a stormy photograph for my book, my Fiordland book, which I hadn't been able to achieve from the ground or from boat to boat, so I had to do it by helicopter. It's a pristine area, and photographically it's a paradise. That's why I moved here. When I walk in the wilderness here, if I see a footprint, I think, I get a bit greedy and think, what are they doing here? This is my beach today. I remember that we talked about it reasonably often, times like Christmas or when there's grandchildren around, but we thought after that long a period, if he was alive, something would have got out. So we just assumed he was killed. And there's no way of communicating, no way at all. My mother rang me one day from her little flat around in White Street in Rangiora. And she was sounding very shaky. And I said, what's the matter, Mum? She said, you've got to come round. There's something here I've got to show you. And she'd gone to the letterbox that morning and picked up a letter with Russian stamps on it. But then she looked at the handwriting and immediately recognised that it was from him. Waldemar's. Milia. After half a century, I'm able to write again. The well-known name. I'll bend my grey head at your feet. For all the hardship. No. No. Will I ever see either of you again? I don't know. In my thoughts, I'm always with you, even in the long years when you have been apart. Maybe one of you will write all the very, very best with respect, Valdis. Yeah. She could see a crowd at the window, one of the windows in the building, and she was shaking. she just didn't know what to expect. It was an emotional roller coaster the whole trip. We were there for about 3 weeks, I think. It was great joy initially, but 45 years is a lifetime, isn't it? And we know that it was a lifetime when we faced each other after the initial greetings and cheers. We realised that there was a lifetime between us, which was quite sad. My father wanted my mother to stay there, but she was sure she didn't want to go back and live there. Her health wasn't that great. She had a heart problem, and she had grandchildren back here, and it was just too delicate on that side because he was living with another woman who had a son and grandchildren too. So how do you make that work? But I stayed an extra 10 days or something because I couldn't face going home. I was just drained. I was useless, mentally useless after that experience. I didn't expect it to affect me that much, but it was pretty hard going. Her life was full of suffering. She didn't have the best times of her life were between 20 and probably 25. Yeah. Every time I produced something new, I was very proud, of course. I sent him every calendar I produced every year, and then every book that came out until he died. That's that one placed. Right. I hadn't got the power anymore to, do the things I really enjoyed down there, so it was time to change scale. White heron and fog. So the biggest spaces are there, and we're using 10 around there, but we can jam those in. We can put one above the other. This is a diary entry from my father on the 26th of October 1943. My little son is a month old and I still have not seen him. What are Malia and the baby doing now? I wish that he would grow strong and become a real person in his own right, that he would have to face the deepest sorrow and have the ultimate happiness, that he would be honest and protect weaker ones than himself, that he would make his own decisions instead of letting other people make his mind up. Without all that, life is not worth living. Very profound.
So, some of you have seen that, no doubt, but it gives a bit of I'll put this in my pocket. And there, I think some of you might have seen it. It's been circulated quite well, and I use it for an introduction to people, to clubs and organisations that have not heard of me. So, you've seen it. Well, it says quite a lot about my photography, in that I spend up to 90% of my time researching an image before I even get the camera out. In fact, I went to sell my camera the other day, and I've had it for 5 years, and it's only got a few thousand, 3,000 images, you know, on the frame counter, on the digital counter on it, and the guy in the shop said, "Are you sure there isn't something wrong with this camera? It's only showing 3,000 images over 5 years." So, you know, that's including my playing around with it initially. So I only take about 20 a year, and I take things that are timeless. This photo is 40 years old, but I approached the farmer and told him that I wanted something that said New Zealand, and he said he got all carried away with it himself and said, "Well, you want sheep, you want horses, you want dogs, you want Mount Cook," and that's what we did. It took us a week to take this photograph. No one made any money out of it, including the farmer, but he kept the sheep in the yards close to the road, just in the next paddock. The horses in the barn next to the paddock, and the muster was on called from up the road. And when the morning came, we finally got the weather we wanted, and we put the sheep on the road and put a Land Rover down the back, stopped cars coming through. Didn't tell the cops, of course. and another one down the road towards Mount Cook, and stopped the traffic while we took the photograph. You can see the frost coming off the backs of the sheep. So they were stationary, and I was on top of the Land Rover, and we got the photo. And that has sold for, it's been in all the undergrounds in the world, just about, in Russia and America and Britain. And I've seen it in London, walked into the underground in London and just about bowled over by the thing on the wall there, about 20 metres across. So I take my time and take photographs that don't date, that haven't got anything in them. Musters always wear the same clothes, and Mount Cook the same, except for the peak that's fallen off on the far side. So, oops, there, right. The same with this one, in the Ahuriri Valley. In the Ahuriri Valley, everyone knows where that is, at the start of the Lindis Pass. Yeah. And the farmer there at the station, I'd been on to him for years, 3 or 4 years, to let me know when the snow was right. In fact, I'd marked the spot where I was going to take the photographs. I pre-visualised the snow, and I said, "Ring me as soon as you know it's going to snow." I had what do you call it, a steel peg in the ground right where I had the tripod, and that was there for 3 years, and I waited for the call. And I finally got the call. Unfortunately, when the snow was off the trees, but it kept the cattle out of those paddocks, and it kept the sheep out of them, so there weren't tracks all over the place. And it's all communication. So I spoke to the high country farmers and told them what I wanted. I wanted that row of trees. I wanted snow on the ground, and it's a matter of just communicating and going to see them as often as I could when I went down that way, and they were all happy to help. So that has been around for 30 odd years too. So and I think the station has changed hands several times since then, but it's a timeless photograph, and you notice the simplicity of the tones, and the composition is simple, and that's what I've concentrated over the years: simplicity of colour and tone and composition and timelessness, and as few people as I can possibly get in them. And this is Fjordland. I spent 500 nights in tents in Fjordland. I didn't go near the tracks and stay in the huts, except for one or two special cases like Georgetown, which had a hut at the head of it. But this is Dusky Sound, and on top of Mount Pender. And I went around with the helicopter hunters to find the spot, and using a GPS and a sun angle finder, I discovered that the sun set from the top of Mount Pender to where it is now at 7th of February, whatever the month that was. So I flew back in and camped just in the bush below. We were every morning, every night, and every night I trudged up to the top and waited. And I waited for a week for the sun, that to clear enough to get the photograph. But it was pre-visualised, and that's the secret of my photography. 90% is pre-visualised, and some people think that, some photographers say that I'm stayed in my thinking, but I know what I want. I know what the camera is capable of. I generally only take 1 or 2 frames from the angle that I've selected. Now, some people might say that that is, pig-headed. So be it. So I'm known to be pig-headed, but the sun on this night it set, and I was halfway down to my tent when, because of the low latitude in Fjordland, low latitudes, yes, things happen very quickly. So the cloud and the rain that was there 5 minutes previously was slowly dissipating. And I had to scramble to get back up to my viewpoint, and my Technorama camera, which 3-to-1 ratio, well, it was 2-to-1 ratio with this one, the Linhof Technorama 6x12, was wet through. So I had to get down to my underpants to dry all the parts of the camera and put the film in and shake all the water off to get the photograph. And I got it, because shortly after that, the sun, as you can see, there's a small gap, and it was too bright for any photographs. So I got it within 5 minutes, but it's about killed me getting up to the spot where I wanted to be. But in the process, in the end, I had to make 2 trips there, because the first trip blew away the fly from my tent, and I camped at the top, and realised that I couldn't stay there for very long. If it always came up, I could have lost everything. As it was, my fly was torn to shreds. And during the day, I was up the tops most days, and there's a family of Kias that adopted me and would come and investigate all my cooking gear around I used to rinse it out in the ponds and leave it on rocks. And slowly everything started to disappear, especially the plates, tin plates that were noisy. When I went for a walk, I was sure I'd left 3 plates out there, but there's only one. And knives and forks, they slowly disappeared. And one day I was there, and the family of Kias came in. And behind where I was taking the photograph from was a vertical drop into a valley behind me of about 1,000 feet. And it was rocks all the way down. And the Kias, one of them would pick up a plate and throw it towards the cliff. Another one would pick it up from there and throw it closer to the cliff edge. And the 4 of them would all follow squawking away to the edge. And then one of them would throw it across, and they'd all lean over the cliff edge and listen to it clattering down. So they spent the week getting rid of my cutlery. Little buggers. But it was fun being there, and I've got photos of them with their heads buried in my mug of tea and all that sort of thing, and pulling my hat off when I was sleeping in the tussock. But they were a lovely company to have, even though they did a lot of damage. So that's the story. Again, I'll keep reinforcing it. I had pre-visualized where the sun was going to set. I knew I wanted a clearance of weather at the time I took the photograph, and it fell into place. Now, it doesn't always happen that things fall into place like that. I've got over half my notebook full of locations that I want certain things to happen. And they don't happen, as you know. But there's enough there in the 3 photographs I've showed you to believe that it can happen, and you have to persevere. You just have to persevere, or else take it and say, oh, well, near enough. That's not good enough, but it's got to be right. It sounds pedantic, but in my case, it's true. There. This is subantarctic islands. I think it's Macquarie Island, and the birds, albatrosses that are nesting there, they stay on the nest on a pedestal about 2 foot high to keep out of the moisture, and they keep filling up underneath their nest to make them comfortable, if you know what I mean. And I knew that I wanted this photograph, so I camped right there, right where the camera is. And I put up the tent, but there's nowhere, it was boggy ground apart from where they built the nests. So I had to carefully take the ropes from the tent between them and peg it into the ground behind them. And they won't move off of their nest. They slowly get used to you. And as long as you don't move fast and keep down to their height, they are quite tame. and in fact, these 2, I was lying quite close to them before I took the photograph. And one of them reached over. As I said earlier, the only place that's dry is at the base of their nests. So I was curled around, they're used to me at this stage. I was curled around one of the spots, one of the nests, and I felt something picking away at my hair and my ears and reaching over to my nose. And then I saw this great beak come over that could take my fingers off and just exploring me. You feel its beak. Feeling my hair, feeling my ears, feeling my nose, and it just accepted me. And it was a beautiful feeling that these wild animals, albatross chicks in this case, were accepting me as a stranger. I wasn't a menace, I wasn't a threat to them at all. I was lying there waiting for the light, and I picked tussock, which is out of the reach of them on their nests. They won't get off of the nests because over the years, they've evolved to stay on the nest for up to 2 years, 3 years. Because if they're off the nests and their parents come back, they won't feed them. So the chicks are very reluctant to get off the nest. But they've reached round everywhere within a certain circumference of the nest and picked all the tussocks which they shove underneath them. And these two, the one I was sleeping under, I was just picking and chewing the tussock. It reached over the top, grabbed the tussock out of my mouth and shoved it underneath its, put it in its nest. And I continued to do this for I don't know how long. It was quite amusing. But when I stopped doing it, it bent right over and looked at me and said, as though to say, come on, go and do your bit. Come on, pick those bits over there so I can reach them. Yeah, but it was a revelation of what New Zealand used to be like, I suppose, when you were lying amongst birds like that are wild and fully accept you because you've treated them thoughtfully. You haven't made sudden moves. You hadn't been above them. If you moved too quickly, they got frightened. But I was there with them long enough to be accepted by them, and that was a great feeling to be accepted by birds that had never seen a human being before. So I think people have said that have been to the subantarctic islands who have had the freedom that I had down there, but mind you, I've been there for 12 trips, so I had pretty much the freedom of the islands, unlike the tourists who have to stick to the boardwalks of the islands. If you're there, as I was, with the help and encouragement of Doc, I had the free reign of the islands, and I always treasure those times. In fact, I still dream about them because the wildlife. I could. There's another story. The seals, the seal pups were like puppies. They're only under a metre long, and they're great big eyes, just as you imagine that little soft toys might be. And they chase each other around, and they pick up a twig, and the others will all chase it. And a number of times that one ran blindly into my leg, and the others looked up and saw this monster standing there, and it all scattered. But at other times, you're in a tent, and we had the door open because it was either too hot or whatever. And that 2 or 3 of them would come into the tent and lie on top of your sleeping bag for your warmth, and adopt you as a bed warmer, if you like. And I loved all those moments of being accepted by the wildlife of the subantarctic islands. And I don't know what it's like now. It's about 10 years since I've been there, but I live on the memories of those encounters. Oh, this is a different atmosphere. Down in Antarctica. Excuse my voice. I had a minor stroke before I had the knee replacement, so I'm suffering from a sore knee and a sore everything else from the minor stroke, and I tend to waffle a bit. So forgive me for that, but you can still throw rotten tomatoes at me because I get carried away, especially about the wildlife down there, even though I haven't got many photographs of them. But this was IMAX crevasse on Mount Erebus, on the slopes of Mount Erebus, and it was about 200 or 300 metres long and 50 metres across and 50 metres high. It was always groaning and creaking, and it was quite scary to be in, but you were roped up with a guide, a mountaineer guide, and there's only 6 in the string, and It was the first time I was interviewed with Kim Hill. She was down there interviewing people and what they were doing down at Antarctica, and I was always terrified of her because she used to be a real man-eater. And but I spent a night with her and several others in the bar in Scott Base, and we all got high together. and she was quite friendly because I'm innocent of the things that she doesn't like in males, I think. And I was fifth on the string and she was sixth. And at one stage I gave her a pull when she was on the end and told her that there's men around the world that would love to have her on the end of a short string. Yeah, so I was lucky I was able to joke with her. so it didn't offend her, but she said, what did she say? Well, that's really cruel, Andris. But now I'll remember it. No, she interviewed me twice more since then, so that was all right. So I got on well with her. But anyway, yeah, that's my mouth. I get myself into trouble at times with my mouth. I wanted to be off the string. That's the guy there, and it took me a quarter of an hour to persuade him to let me into the cave, just on the camera and tripod, with him watching from the entrance. It was barely man-sized, the hole at the end, and the whole thing around me was creaking and groaning and moving, but I knew there was a photograph there. It's one of the few times that I've seen the photograph on the spot and said, I've got to have that. And it was so, I was pleading with the guide that this is my only chance to get this, because I'll never be back there, and this ice cave could collapse in within a week. And he said, well, it could collapse in half a minute too. But I finally got my way, and I got in there and got the photograph of him standing at the entrance, and it's all film, so there's a lot of holding back of the dark blue of the edges, and the sun and the daylight coming through behind him, and I really pushed the film to the limits. It was E6 transparency film on a 6x12 camera. And I really pushed the limits of that film to get as much detail as I could in the shadows and the highlights, if you understand that. So it is manoeuvrable, these like black and white. I had a Calenta processor. You're all familiar with the circular Calenta made by Agfa. I used to process my E6 in that, and I found that as long as I treated it fairly gently, E6 first developer was a black and white developer, so you could overexpose it and underdevelop it, so to get less contrast. Is that the right way around? Overexpose and underdevelop. Yeah. So in the first developer, you get more, change the contrast level. It's very delicate, very tricky to do, but you could do it. And these days you can't. Oh, you can do it on digital, but it's the only time that I managed to get it on film is to overexpose, underdevelop, to get the contrast I wanted. And I took 2 rolls of film on even though there's only 6 on a roll of film, of 120 film, on the Linhof 6x12. So, you understand that? By the way, if anyone's got any questions, the best time to ask them is during the progress, during the showing, because I'll have forgotten all about what went previously. And I talked a lot about being in Fiordland for over 500 nights in tents, and there were days when I couldn't do anything, and I wandered around with macro lens on the thief on the Canon and photographed driftwood and patterns of tree trunks and but I only got one example there. This one, I think it was about F16 or F22, but I had to choose something. It was prime, what's the word I'm looking for? A prime case when selective focusing, focus stacking would have worked, but I wasn't very familiar with it at the time, so I was very careful to choose things that fell into place about 11 or 16. This is, you're getting the impression now, I hope, that everything is planned, including this one. I got the tail unit of a D-model helicopter that was outdated. Anyone from civil aviation here? And I went around the country waving my D-model tail, saying, "Would you put this on your machine?" Because I'd built a bracket on it to hold a camera, and I had strapped underneath what do you call those bits sticking out underneath? No. I was in the helicopter with a remote control. So when we went deer hunting, I was able to. There's only deer hunter in the helicopter who was leaning well out of the helicopter. The rest were just stayed inside the helicopter, and the barrel was sticking out. So I'm very pleased that I got this. It's one of the few photographs that I've seen of deer hunters hunting from a helicopter. And I took scenics as well. This is down southern Fiordland. I forget which sound it is, but I bought a large film holder for the back of a Canon that took 500 or 400 and something frames of film for 35 minutes, and I bought 33-foot rolls of film to put in it, so it didn't have to stop very often because it's too dangerous to go round the back and disconnect the camera and change the film. In fact, I just about killed the pilot of one helicopter because I had a filter on the camera that was metal thread on metal thread, and it got to really ice cold, and it worked loose, and you hear the tail rotor hit it with a crack, and he was leaning on the door like this, on the pilot's door, and the hole appeared in the perspex there. No, it was over here. That would have been the end of him, and I would still be in jail probably. But it was stretching limits of what you could do with a camera, and all those photographs so far have shown you that if you persevere, if you communicate with the people in the correct manner, you can work wonders, even though it was risky like this one. But we weren't aware that it was going to work loose because we had masking tape around the filter and around the lens, but it was also cold that the adhesive came loose and slowly unwound. And just wanted to anyway, we survived. That's in a different lens, a wide-angle lens on the same camera, in the Rakaia Gorge. Same technique. So it's limited. But in Fiordland, before I spent the 500 odd days getting my photographs for the books, I used to go along and work with the helicopter pilots to get their deer. And they would drop me off when I at a point where I thought I could get a photograph if everything fell into place, but I had to work my way with them to make it work for them. I couldn't go for nothing. I couldn't go without paying them in some way or other for the privilege of getting my photographs. I couldn't afford to fly. But it always amazed me that they came back at that time of night. You can see the lights on the tail. They seem to just, they say, this will do fine, this place, this, and they go off for a couple of hours and hunt. And thank God they always came back, because every time they left me, I'd think, what have I got in my pack? Have I got any matches? Have I got a parka? I've got no food. All they have to do is forget where they dropped me, and I'm buggered, literally. Or they crashed, which they did quite often, and I'll be left on a mountaintop somewhere in Fiordland, so without knowing where I was. But I got lots of photos that way. It meant taking a risk, but I'm stupid. I took risks. Yeah, and we carried the flying. I was always pushing limits a bit, and this is a pre-dawn. You can see the light from the helicopters lighting up the skiers. They weren't going to ski, but it made an interesting photograph. That's all the reason I took it. That's the only reason I took it. You can tell from the rotation of the blades what the exposure time was on transparency film. So I had to get the pilot. I was wearing one of these things and using a lot of four-letter words to get the pilot to slow down and stop swaying around and stay in one place. And the lights on the skiers. So once again, it's all communication and knowing who you're going to work with, and not just blundering onto the scene and saying, "Oh, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do the other thing?" All the high country stuff and the farms, I had to work with them, lighting fires and helping with the cooking and all that sort of thing. This is the Snares Islands, an albatross flying in the foreground, and as we approached the rocks on the south end of the island, I thought there's a number of sailing ships that were wrecked on those islands, those sub-Antarctic islands. Can you imagine that with the tailwind under sail approaching that and suddenly seeing rocks and all their ways? There's no escape from them. We were powered, but who's to know whether the motor would keep going? But when I'm in situations like that, I think back 100 years to when sailing ships were in that vicinity, and then the fog suddenly cleared, and there's rocks just standing there in their path. What do they do? In the Auckland Islands alone, there's 9 or 10 known shipwrecks. This is on the further north. And I took a lot of chances with finance as well. I always had trouble finding a helicopter pilot who'd fly in the worst possible weather situations until I got a few of them and explained what I wanted to do. I wanted a clearing light from invariably went flying on days that were borderline, you could say. And quite often I failed, so I lost a lot of money by flying, not unsafely, but you can fly safely in fine weather and know you can get a photograph. If you're flying in dirty weather, hoping for a clearance, that's not financially very safe. But this happened enough times to make it worthwhile. There's a break in the cloud and the sun comes through and you've got the shot. You might have been hanging around that spot for half an hour burning up fuel, but it did happen. We'll forget about the times it didn't happen, but that was just money down the drain, literally. Same with this one, right down the south of Fiordland. There was a photo there, but most of the time there's no sunlight on the hills, there's no clouds of ice and snow going across the scene, and the sun shining through on those. So we wasted almost a tank full of fuel going backwards and forwards in front of that scene, hoping that would be light, lighting up the foreground for us and lighting up the snow shower. In the meantime, I was freezing to death with the snow door on and the helicopter, and it was well below freezing. But you know, there is merit in pre-visualization as long as you know what you're looking for and are prepared to lose out in a big way financially if you fail. So I have been broke. I went to Chile on the same principle with the family for a year, and I was going to do a book, but never came about. I arrived back in New Zealand. Our family arrived back in New Zealand completely broke. It's the only time in my life that I've been completely broke. There wasn't even 5 cents in my pocket. The credit cards were full, and had no money. Had to get from Auckland to Christchurch to get home, and we had no money. There was 4 of us on the beach. In Auckland, we spent lots of our money on fish and chips. But I remember thinking, got nothing. But I don't know where that came from. But I went to Air New Zealand, and I've been working for them for 10 years, photographing their locations for them around the world, and admitted to him that I was stony broke. And he just laughed, pressed his intercom, got a secretary to come in, and wrote the tickets for all 5 of us, and said, "Oh, pay me back when you can." So, you know, you can either play it safe or play stupidly like I did at times, and I was not that sensible. What's the time? 9 o'clock? Yeah, I'll this is an Okarito. The sun just coming up in winter, so it's just a little gap there. A Lindhoff 6x17, nice blue of darkness in winter, and the sun just coming through a fine gap in the middle. Getting exposure is the hardest part on a photograph like this. And this is after, in the Ahuriri Valley, after sunset. It could be a bit darker, but it was in winter when the fog was rolling down the hills. You know how it does when the sun's slowly going down. It's getting, slowly getting darker, and the mist is tumbling down the hills, and getting the mist falling in and showing through just enough. 10 minutes after this, you couldn't see anything except mist. And this started off as colour, but the old hut, it's in, I can't remember where, but I changed it to black and white, and changed it to slight sepia, and I gave it a whitish background because most of the colour was white. So you do play with it, but it's all part of the preconceived plan when I took the photograph. So it's all part of the composition, all part of your brain beforehand. So it's like, I forget the name of the photographer who says, the heart and mind are the true lenses of the camera. Who said that? Nobody knows. Somebody said that, and for me, it's all the heart of the photograph is the lens of the camera, the heart, you know, the feeling of the image. So that's what carries me to. And same with portraits. We won't keep you till midnight, as Ian said. But I've only taken 3 or 4 portraits, apart from my days as a portrait photographer before I was a landscape photographer. But they're all treated the same as landscapes. But this guy was in Manali, India, and I was in the town for about a week, and I knew he was after as many people as possible, especially tourists, to photograph him because they gave him rupees, and he was a druggie. So he couldn't understand why I wouldn't photograph him, and he followed me around the town every time I came to town. But he was always in a sunny spot and always, grating. And one day I saw him in a dark alley. He was grooming himself. I don't know what he was doing, but everything toned in beautifully. The doors, his clothes, the monkey, everything. And in those days I had a 35mm, 85mm lens, 1.2. Can anyone remember that? Some oldies like me. And I had a wide open lens, wide open Kodachrome 64, and I got his hands, the pot, his face, the monkey's face, all in focus, including his front on f1.2, and I'm very proud of that one. And that's another one I took carefully. I was in Thailand doing a book with other photographers for the King of Thailand, and I was sent down to Koh Phangan to photograph whatever I could find. And in the women's section of the mosque, where I was normally not allowed to go, but because it was for the King of Thailand, it was open doors everywhere. But this little girl was continually being hidden by her mother, brushed aside, brushed behind her. and she kept popping out like that and saying, what are you going to do this time, Mum? And I was ready, but it cost me a lens because I needed an 85 lens, that 85mm lens we were talking about, to throw the others out of focus and to select the area that I wanted. And I took the 24mm lens off and carefully put it on the concrete pedestal beside me, except that the concrete pedestal wasn't there, and the lens went plop onto the concrete and it broke. But I got that photograph, and that won the International Photographer of the Year through, I don't know, some camera company. But it's trying to anticipate what we see and what we think might happen. That could easily not have happened at all. That could easily not have happened. But I saw her, the young child, poke out occasionally, and thought, if she sticks her head out again, I'll get the photograph. And it happened. But most of the time, things like that didn't happen. This is Adams Island on the Auckland Islands, and it's probably a wandering albatross chick on its nest. But the cliffs were so formidable in the background that I camped right there, right where I was. and it's a nature reserve on the extreme end of the Auckland Island, main Auckland Islands. And I was lucky to be there. I was 6 weeks on the island, but very, very few photographs. But I was dedicated, and this is one of them where I wanted the easterly sun shining on them instead of overcast grey, which it was most afternoons. So I camped there. Yeah. And back to Fiordland, and I knew the skippers fairly well on the boats because I was doing this book on Fiordland, and that I was on something, I forget which one of the luxury boats from what was then Fjorden Travel in Doubtful Sound. And it was hosing there. Just about, and the wind was 80 or 90 knots, so we had a hard job staying back with the wind because the spray was coming over the stern. The skipper was trying to keep me up with the water flowing down that face, which wasn't a waterfall until it rained. And this is the West Coast. This is my most popular image of the West Coast. It strikes a chord with people from the West Coast, all the Rimu and the mist going between them gives them a third dimension, a lift, and the tone and the reflections. It makes for a peaceful sort of arrangement. And people like it for their walls, unlike the fishing boat you saw in the waves. No one would have that on their wall, but this one, they like it. You know, you'll notice that most of the time I stick to simple tones, as simple tones as possible. This is complicated by the trees, but the mist going between them helps give them a third dimension, whereas they're not one plane. And right down the bottom of Fjorden, I spent 12 weeks down there. People think I'm nuts, but they're right. But I've got photos like this to remember the bottom of Fjorden. And I walked around for a week in the bush. Everyone thinks it's easy to photograph bush. It's not. To get the right light on bush, unless you're clever, I'm not, is lightly overcast, no wind. And the bush is so thick that you can walk around for days and not find a scene that helps you with the creek, and gives you a third dimension because of that creek and the trees receding off into the. That's the only bush photograph I've got down there. So people grizzle. You know, I run a gallery in Diamond Harbour, and I've run 2 other galleries in the past, and people grizzle about the prices of the print. And I think to myself, I spent 12 weeks down there to get that bush photograph. Yeah. That's just black and white. And that's the Cascade River down southwestland. We flew down in a helicopter. It was a friend, and we slept in the riverbed under the helicopter so that we were on the spot the next day. Otherwise it would have been too costly. So we caught some trout. Yeah. And that's a stitch from the air. Mount Pembroke and Milford Sound is just over the back. But that's the good thing about helicopters, is you can move 1 metre to the right, 1 metre to the left. You can go up 6 inches or down 9 inches. And if the weather is stable, you can stay there. That's 9 stitches with a cannon. Taken so that the ridges are separated, the tops of the ridges are separated, and the light shafts on the far background are down, but no lake is showing. There's a lake in between there, and we just load the helicopter until the lake was just out of sight, because if we went down any further, we'd lose the definition of the foreground. So if you follow that. But you'll notice all these photographs that I consider my favourites are simple in tone. It's all blue. And talking about getting to know the people, going on musters with them for a week, and then it's no good asking them on the first day, I want the cattle or sheep in a certain place. They just laugh at you and tell you to bugger off. But if you're with them for a week and you're helping them with in the hut with food and everything else, you're accepted as part of the team, and they'll go out of their way to help you to get the. And that was a cold Saturday. Oh, no, don't know where the next one is. The next day was fine, and of course they were driving the cattle across the ridge. This is Fox Coast here. We're for 10 days we were stuck in the hut because of bad weather, and I went out for a pee one night, and it was just lifting. So it was just lifting. So I got on my skis and skied straight across from the hut, and got the last possible light on the background there. That's knowing what you want is half the battle. Knowing. It doesn't matter if I failed. If you fail, you go back with an inferior result. I'd rather go back with nothing and wait for another chance, even though over half the ones I've tried, I've failed at. So I'm not rich, you can tell that. And Lake Maparika, halfway between Fox and between Okarito and Franz Joseph. I've got a wee stablecraft that I went round that lake. There must be 1 million trees in that lake. And this is the only one I've found that I wanted to photograph because it's like a garden around it. Every other tree had broken branches hanging down, and the light coming across the foreground there was from, it's only, put it this way, it's only available in winter and in May because of the light coming from the left. This one is really hard work. It was in Oman, on the border with Saudi Arabia and Oman, up at about 6,000 feet. And it was the only tree I found in that area that had that broken pattern. I used sharpening a lot on the trunk to make those lines stand out, give them more character. I took the original in colour, of course, but black and white it works better. And what light can do to a background, this is dusky sound in Fiordland, and I was down there for 10 days, but at last we got light on coming across early in the morning, and the mist clearing, and that's what I was waiting for the whole time. I was trying to get a photograph before and after to show you, but I got stuffed up. I didn't. And this is the Cascade River, the same time as the other one I pointed out to you in the past. I like the shape of the river flowing through the scene and the mist, and got up at 3 o'clock and flew, 3 a.m. to fly, while the forest in the background and the mist was on the trees surrounding the river, and only the glow of the moon was on the river. Now that's pushing things to the extreme. It's lucky that I could fly with someone I knew. Now I was only paying the cost of the fuel and the running time. Otherwise, forget it. That's Auckland Islands returning. And that, believe it or not, is from Okarito, from our deck. It was an oily sea, and with the sun in it, it was a big orange ball just above the horizon. I thought it was distracting because it was large and bald, the sun, whereas I like the reflections of the sun above in the backwater and in the foreground too. but I didn't like the sun. My eye went straight to it. And people say, some people like it, but a lot of people don't. So I like it because of that. And this is a cover of one of my Fjordland books. I keep saying simplicity, 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 simplicity. This is simple in that it's all the same tone. It's got ridges separated by mist, receding into the background, so it's got some third dimension to it. And simplicity doesn't matter. Sorry, it's my stroke. I can't pronounce the word properly, but simplicity comes in all flavours. You can use a simplicity of colour, simplicity of composition, etc. And if one of them or two of them are used, it gives a third dimension, which is so hard to get in a photograph. Yeah. And the same applies here in Marlborough Sounds. Flying in a northwest conditions, knowing that there's breaks in the cloud, hoping that they'll come before they run out of fuel. and one of my best photographs of the Sounds was taken because I was prepared to take the risk. And I could be driving electric Mercedes if I didn't waste time on flying all these. And I've got an admission to make about this one. It's two photographs. Now, the waves are 5 to 6 metres and the wind's 50 knots. And the wave, the Jasmine, which is 50 foot, is riding up, was just about rolled it. And that same wave I had to take 5 seconds later when it hit the cliffs on the background, and then I stripped them together. So what is that? Is that a sandwich, or is it a stitch, or is it a false? Yeah. well, I couldn't get the boat on top of a wave because I couldn't get the water breaking on the rocks in the background in the same image. No matter if I went further out, and we could have done it, I suppose, but not further in, because there's so many things happened on that photograph that the guy who was the crewman on the boat, it was his first trip out, and when he got back to port at Milford, they went. Oh, I forget where they were. They might have gone south. He walked off the Jasmine and never went back to sea again in his life. Everything that was loose in the boat broke on that wave. And that's the same wave that hit the background is going up 50 or 60 or 70 feet. God knows how high it is. Can any of you think of how else to do that? On top of it all, the helicopter was flying backwards into the wind, into 50 knots of wind, so it was flying backwards about 20 or 30 knots. And that's 80 or 90 knots, and it blew the flame out in the turbine. So there's a huge explosion. I thought, no one's going to see this photograph because we were going to go under. And I was in the harness, the door off, and the carabiner was behind me. There's no way I could get out in time. But the pilot had experience, had been taught what to do 30 years previously when he was going for his license. And he had instant reflexes. If he didn't have instant reflexes, I wouldn't be talking to you today about it. But he spun it round into the wind and pressed the starter again, and luckily it caught, and off we went. But it was a close call there. That's the Okarito River. only in the middle of May that happens, when the sun is between two mountains to the right, and there's frost on the ground, which is dissipating and lifting as the sun hits them. Rest of the year, forget it. Okay, so you've got to know what you're after and when it's likely to happen. This one is a pure, I was playing around with neutral density. It's 35 minutes, broad daylight, 35 minutes exposure. I cut the ridge out to the right to simplify it and kept just the horizon and the beach in focus. But that's the gallery in Okarito. That's the gallery in Franz, which was a write-off, and that's the gallery here in Diamond Harbour. So we just, I came here to retire, so we're not too fast. We we've tried trying to advertise it, but we're by appointment only, so there it is. So that's all I've got to show. It's bloody near 9:30. I'm sorry I've kept you up so late. I could keep going for a long time, but that'll do. There you go.
Wow, what a visual feast, eh? Has anybody got any questions? So now, when we do questions, we need to pass the mic around, remembering we're streaming. And just for a second, talking about streaming, when I started this introduction there, my phone rang and I pushed the button to say stop quickly, and I looked afterwards, and the phone call was from Brian Haybiddle. So I messaged Brian back and said, I'm at CPS, you should be watching the streaming, Andy's speaking, and he said, I know, I saw you were there, so I thought I'd ring and see if your phone was not on silent. So thank you, Brian, I hope you're still watching. Does anybody have any questions for Andris before we
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm an idiot, but photographer who's prepared to go the whole hog if I had to, even if I went broke. And I did go broke, and I'm still not rich, but...
I think we're just gobsmacked. I think visually everybody has come to the magical overload, and I was sitting there thinking which is my favourite all the way through that, and I have got no idea, but I have got a couple that have really tweaked my mind. Another thing that's worth mentioning is there are probably 2 spare seats on the Pure Salt 2026 10 days in Doubtful Sound, still available on the CPS trip. So that might, if that didn't inspire you to go to Fiordland for 10 days, then nothing ever will. But anyway, so you need to be quick to get into those. If nobody's got any questions, we'll finish off, and I've got a few notices to read out. Hang on a second. And I googled it. It was Joseph Karsh who said that about the heart and mind is the soul of the photograph. Anyway, coming up shortly, there's a couple of hand-ins not too far away. 26th of February, print number 1. As I said, Di's not here at the moment, but so she'll be in a position to pick up photographs from here on in, I imagine. And then early in March, on the 5th, I think it is, Natural History PI1, is it the 5th? Okay. For next week, we've got a really cool evening next week. First of all, the 7 o'clock session is a photo quiz. So we're looking for quiz teams to come along, and basically we can organise teams when we're here. There's going to be a photo quiz, which is going to be 20 questions, and then 10 photographs to identify. So there's going to be like a 30-question pub quiz of photos here for the 7 o'clock session. That should be quite a bit of fun. It should take us 30 minutes, 40 minutes maybe to run through that and then have a cup of tea. And then after that, we have Kieran from Photosynthesis coming to talk to us. Dennis has done a fantastic job of organising a really good deal with Photosynthesis. If those of you haven't spoken to them or been there before, they have a really cool workshop space that they have a studio and a studio hire thing. So we have got a CPS membership to the studio, effectively. So I'll let Kieran explain it all next week, but the bottom line is we've got a really, really good deal on using a studio, and it's a really good studio. So if you're into that, come and listen. They also have just started up a black and white darkroom. So if anybody's got any printing enthusiasm, in fact, I'd recommend it to anybody. If you have never stood there and wobbled a little tray and seen a print materialise in front of you, you have missed out and you're not really a photographer. So I recommend you should really, really do that. And we're making that available through Kieran next week. So come along. He's going to be speaking at 8 o'clock and telling us all about those deals. So that's, we're off with a hiss and a roar this year, so let's just keep going. Special thanks, firstly, for everybody coming tonight. It was a great evening. Special thank you to Nicola for running the 7 o'clock session, where it looked like it went down really well. Tim's gone now, but Andrew for running the IT, and Dennis for opening up and getting things all ready. About now, I would have handed Andris this card and stuff to say thank you on behalf of us, but it's in the kitchen. I got it out, but I didn't bring it through here. So I'll give it to you before we go. But once again, I'd just like to everybody else to give a hand of applause to Andris Apes. And we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.
Right. Sorry to keep you up. Oh, all the gear.